Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Keele Business Gateway webinar. And today's topic is about how we might do business in a better way. So let me just introduce our guests with us this morning. We have Mike Astbury, who's the MD of Mondrem and Wayfinder Kick. We have Alex Phillips, who's social entrepreneur and support manager with United Limited, and I have my colleague with me, Will Pritchard, who's one of our entrepreneurs in residence, and myself, who's entrepreneur in residence. So welcome this morning, or this lunchtime. Just a little bit of housekeeping. You can join us in the conversation today, either by submitting a question anonymously by email, or by submitting a question to the right hand of the screen and just letting us know what either some of your thoughts or some questions that you might have. The conversation will continue online at Twitter and LinkedIn by using the hashtag Keele Talks Business. So please do join in this morning. So I'd like to start by asking each of the panel members to fully introduce yourselves and to give a brief overview of your background. And shall we start with Mike?
Hi, I'm Mike Astbury. I'm a director of Mondrem and Wayfinder Kick. We're a community interest company, two community interest companies trying to reimagine what public services can be in a number of areas, including in mental health and in the property and planning system. I've got a bit of a mixed background. I've had some public sector leadership experience, and I've been a director of a fire and rescue service. And for the last 15 years or thereabouts, I've been running companies in the private sector in consulting, but mostly supporting public service clients.
Oh, and Alex, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, hello all, my name's Alex, and I am a social entrepreneur support manager for Unlimited, which is the Foundation for Social Entrepreneurs. We're a national organisation, but working locally in Stoke-on-Trent and North Staffordshire, and we find, fund and support social entrepreneurs, so individuals who've got ideas or are looking to scale their social venture or are looking for investment. And I help to, I'm the first point of call really for people who are applying, people who are our award winners, and give them a period of support of 1 year, which includes lots of things, including mentoring opportunities and peer learning and leadership preparation and peer networking.
Okay, thank you. And Will?
Sure. My name is Will Pritchard. I am an entrepreneur in residence here at Keele. My background is primarily in creative industries and social innovation, particularly education. So at the moment I run an online community for just over 800 social entrepreneurs. As I said, I work with Keele on the innovation leadership programs, and I also consult on ethical growth.
Okay, thank you. And just to give a little bit of introduction to myself, I'm also with Will. I'm one of the entrepreneurs in residence at Keele University Business School, and my background is in environment and operations. And my own company, we grew that from the four of us originally to 5,500 people over 20 years. And in 2000 was a lovely thing to do for the millennial. We gifted our company to our employees. And for the remaining time till 2011, when we sold to an external company. And since then, I've been working on my own, supporting businesses either to become employee-owned or employee-led businesses, but also my specialism really is in transformation and people. Okay, so let's start with a question really for Sarah. Sarah, can you tell us a little bit about what's your experience of alternative business structures, and if you can take us through at a high level what 2 or 3 of those options might be?
Hi, yeah, it's actually Alex.
Sorry, I
No,
do apologise.
no problem. Yeah, so I think from an unlimited point of view, we don't always prescribe around legal structures for our social entrepreneurs, which is interesting because a lot of funders, particularly if they're looking for startup funding, would need to have a constituted legal structure. And we're more interested really in the person and the idea, and everything else can be built around that. I think it'd be useful, I can talk through really briefly a couple of the common legal structures that our award winners either choose or they come to us with. The first one would be a sole trader. And I think if somebody's got a little bit of an idea and they're just starting to generate some income, a lot of people come to us that they've already registered the business as a sole trader because they haven't got any employees, because they're not big enough and they're not generating enough income, and they haven't got enough customers yet to have that. The other would be a limited company, and I think it's not a dirty word. Because we look at how the applicant can develop their articles of association, so the kind of foundations of what they say they're going to do throughout their business. And it doesn't stop you from applying for startup grants or grants to enable you to grow. And we would support somebody through those processes of kind of to decide what their articles might want to be, what's important to them going forward based on their purpose. And then the third one, I think probably the most common one that most people would have heard of, is the community interest company. I think this is probably a bit more suitable for more established organisations, because there are certain hoops that you have to jump through in terms of reporting, and also asset locks. So what happens to your assets should your business not be trading anymore? Some people think that they need to come to us already with this kind of structure in place, but we would rather it be the other way around. So we'd rather somebody come to us with a really great idea, but not quite clear about how they're going to get there, rather than come to us with a website, a legal structure and a logo, and not really understand fully what it is that they're doing.
Okay, that's a great introduction there. Thank you very much, Alex. So I think what I think is interesting about this whole discussion is throughout COVID, we've heard people talk about what it's done is challenge people about how they might want to continue to run their lives, but also, can we do business in a different way? What does this mean for our businesses if we're talking about that? And what is this new normal, and our new business or alternative business structures part of that? So not wanting to go back to old ways, and what do those structures lend themselves to? Do they lend themselves to anything that might be different, or a different way of working? I know from my experience, and we'll talk about this a bit later, that what we did, that we changed our structure because we felt that it would allow us to completely connect with our social purpose, but also allow us to connect better with our customers and our clients. And we did it because not because we wanted to do, well, we're nice people, but it was actually what our motivation really was, to generate high performance and high value for our organisation, which in turn meant for our employees and for our customers. But it was about a different way of working. So if I just move to you, Mike, why did you choose to become a KIC rather than keep to your traditional business structure? What were you trying to achieve?
Well, we became a limited company initially by accident, because I had never heard of a KIC, being honest about it. And so we set out in that direction. And only after a little while of trading, I thought our purpose is very much about having a public service centred purpose, making a real difference. Most of the people in the company have personal stories that about brilliant public services and actually awful public services, sometimes in the same place with the same people. So it's a very strongly purpose-led thing. And what we discovered a little bit was that there was a bit of incongruity between what we appeared to be before you met us and what people found us to be after they knew us. And as a limited company to our public sector clients, it looked a little bit like we were coming along to make money out of them, even make money out of other people's misfortune. That really wasn't what they found when they dealt with us, and it certainly wasn't our purpose. So becoming a community interest company puts a badge on the outside that says that's very similar to what's on the inside, that we have we're not here to make me or my colleagues a pension fund. We're here to do something that's about what we really believe in. So that was the main reason for doing it, and that was beneficial to our customers. But it's also been a fantastic way of attracting people who believe the same things that we believe to either join the business or support it in some ways. And I'd be interested in what Alex has to say about this. But some funders or potential funders have said to us, it's very reassuring to us that you are in that position. We know that you're doing it for the right reason, and any funds might go to the right place.
Absolutely. I mean, just bring you in a second, Alex, but absolutely that is my experience as well. When we eventually floated our company on the stock market in 2007, because we wanted to raise funding to be first in market on photovoltaic. It was not really on market then, and actually our structure really enabled a different kind of investor to come forward and say, actually, we want to be part of this because we love the sense of purpose, we love the kind of organisation you are, and you really add value to the investor conversations that we had. So I completely get that. Alex, what's your experience of this?
I think a kick is a kind of reassuring structure in many ways. However, I think there is a little bit of misunderstanding about what a kick actually is. I think people do confuse it with charity sometimes, and that is often a disadvantage to the kick owner, because while it makes it easier maybe to apply for grants, I think sometimes customers, especially business-to-business customers, expect lots of things for free. And that just isn't sustainable for the individual social entrepreneurs. I think they get it mixed up with charities and volunteering, and that's not what it is. It's profit for purpose. And I think, it's getting better, but I think there is a bit of misunderstanding there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not that surplus is a dirty word, it's what you use that surplus for and the purpose for what that surplus is meant for, isn't it? And that's the confusion that's often in the middle of that. Will, do you have a question here?
I do. I'd like to follow up on that, if I may. You mentioned purpose there. You mentioned surplus. Can you give us an idea? Maybe start with Mike around what obviously you're generating profit. Where is that profit going? Have you got projects? What are you doing with it?
Yeah, I'd just like to emphasise that a kick is should be a really commercial, fee-earning centred business, because if you believe, as we do, that you're going to do great things, it's really important to make the money that enables you to do that. I don't see any contradiction at all. We have a couple of things going on. We decided to set up a specific community interest project, which we call Nurture. And it's about creating environments, be they small or large, natural environments, places outside, planting trees, planting things, creating good places to be. The word Mondrem actually has an ancient meaning. It means a place of happiness. So it fits rather nicely with this. And Mondrem was a forest, so planting goes well. There's an environmental component to it, but it's about well-being and mental health. The other business, Wayfinder, focuses on supporting people through their mental illness journeys, and it's about engaging with communities. So the projects we've just beginning to, we're very new as a kick, but just beginning to, are very much centred on starting with who is the customer and what do they need, which community are we supporting, rather than creating something and then looking for somebody to benefit from it, much as you would with any new start, starting with what your customers need. And then the other thing is, slightly contrary to what Alex was saying, but not really, is we've been giving some stuff away for free. We have been using some of our time capital and funding to develop products in COVID in the Wayfinder kick to support community mental health networks to provide and restart their peer support networks that have had to be stopped because of the restrictions in lockdown about face-to-face meetings. So you can imagine people with the parents of or people with mental health challenges who particularly need that contact at the moment, finding it more difficult because of lockdown. We've begun providing our Wayfinder Connect platform so that they can do that. And that's brilliant commercially for us as well, because we're learning lots about what people want out of those products and how to develop them. And we're getting good, we hope, some good feedback as we do it. And it just fits really well with what we're trying to achieve as an organisation.
Yeah, absolutely. That integrity gap, as I often talk about, is the difference between what you say and what you do. And organisations like yourself, the kick enables you to. I'm not saying other companies can't, and I work with many traditional organisations that absolutely do that. But with the kick, it just starts that conversation. It's an easier conversation to have, isn't it? Alex, what's your experience of this, particularly of companies and communities who are working in the North Staffs? Do you have experience of this as well?
So can you just add a bit to that question? Sorry,
I'm just in terms of building a social purpose and the connection between what you do as a business and how you feed back into communities and strengthening communities and making communities more resilient. Do you have experience or stories of the people you work with?
Yeah, absolutely, because I think it's the purpose that brings the groups of social entrepreneurs that I'm working with together, because they're all pulling in the same direction. So they might have different objectives. So some have got an environmental focus, some have got a mental well-being focus, some have got a focus on kind of valuing the voluntary sector and the work that involves. But the values, I think, is stuff that it really does bind people together. And it enables them to work collaboratively to help understand what the landscape is and what the barriers might be to them to be sustainable in the future, and to look at strategies about how they might connect with corporate businesses, and looking at the timing of now and all the things that are going on in the world, the environmental. The stuff that's going on in America at the moment, which is going across the world, the COVID, and it's those values that are underpinning that are really motivating people to want to work together and to be able to come through this in a creative way, by not only working collaboratively but looking at kind of the landscape and how we might be able to influence the system to change attitudes. It's quite an exciting time. It's a big challenge, but yeah, I definitely think that the kind of value propositions of all our social entrepreneurs are really helping to bind people together under a common purpose.
Okay, so if we look at this structure that and you're working with the clients, I think it's really, we've got to look, we're still doing business and we're still there to make money and we're still there to employ people. We do have that social purpose. We have a reason to get up in the morning, but we still have to do, like you've mentioned already, Mike, that you still absolutely have to have a load of commercial thinking in there. That doesn't change, and that's absolutely real. So how does the structure does the structure, I guess the question is, does the structure give you greater freedom? Have you found, Mike, a greater freedom of working with clients and customers? You talked about giving stuff away, and that's enabled you to be able to do that. It's made it a little easier to do that. But does it feel different for your customers?
It certainly feels different for us in dealing with our customers. We have found them more open to this collaborative way of working. I think we appear to be initially less threatening. There's a barrier that used to be there that isn't there anymore. It's not the same for everybody. Alex was saying, actually, a kick looks like a charity to a private sector organisation, a KIC looks like a friend to much of the public sector. A KIC looks like a commercial wolf in sheep's clothing to the charity sector sometimes. So, and you're exactly the same thing. So it's not a panacea, but it certainly helps you to think in a way which I think all businesses should. Good leadership is about being confident enough to collaborate with people without fear. If we do things together in competition, then I think that's anti-success in many ways. Being able to build this vital commodity called trust and being able to reach out in a way to look at things from somebody else's perspective and bring yourself into their world from their perspective, looking to help them solve the things that they want to solve, is a really powerful way of getting business and making things happen which would not happen if you did not do that. So whilst I think that's something that happens in KICs and not-for-profits, there's a strong argument to say that that's just good practice. It's good collaborative leadership. And there are lots of examples in this COVID time and in lockdown where we have been forced, not because we wanted to, but we've been forced to collaborate in that way, and we've seen the benefit from it. And what I hope is, post-COVID, that people will go back and remember why they did that, and then go beyond why they did it to remembering how good it was, so that it's sustained as we go forward.
So that kind of leads us on to another challenge, I think, for all businesses, and that is, do alternative structures, do they demand a different way of leading? And I'll explain what I mean by this. I think you've just alluded to it there. And I don't think it's about you're in one structure, you lead in one way, and you're in another structure, you lead in, it's about great leadership. It's not, regardless of your structure. So leadership, in my experience, in an employee-owned business was different in the sense that senior leaders, my business was one of the largest employee-owned businesses because they tend to be quite small. The next biggest one to us was John Lewis Partnership. Can you believe that? It was 90,000 people. So, there's big gaps in terms of sizes of these companies. So the leadership is different because, companies that I've been associated with, like Gripple, Make Architects, John Lewis Partnership, there's a whole range of very, very different kinds of businesses. But the thing that binds us together is actually, when you're a leader in these businesses, not only are you leading and managing the organisation and your employees as employees, you're also leading those people as stakeholders in the business as well. And that demands a very different level of everything in terms of communication, accountability, responsibility. It is a different way of leading. And I think that for me, that as a senior leader in that organisation, it just meant that I was on my mettle every single day of my working life. And even through my involvement in the Oxford Centre for Mutuals, which is one of the great organisations which supports the employee-led businesses, they've identified and working with them. When I worked at Baxter, we were talking really about not only are employees in employee-led businesses like a KIC that they have greater accountability for the results by managers, but managers are regularly held to account by their employee owners, if you like, or their employees themselves for the policies and strategies for the future of the organisations. You attract through your structure some really great, different kind of people, in my experience, and that's big news. That's big news, and of the challenge of COVID, it's big news. So, do you think, is your experience very similar? Do you think we also need, or does it demand a different way of leading?
Was that to me?
Yes, sorry, Mike, it was, or even to Alex. But yes, to you first.
I think we're not yet an employee-owned business, but that will be the plan as we get a little further aligned. But I think there are two different kinds of ownership. There's ownership in a sense of legal ownership, and then there's ownership in sense of owning a shared purpose and mission. And it's absolutely the case that it's important to us that all of us in the business have this ownership. So being able to talk about purpose and things that chime with people's lives and their passions is fantastic. And it's really important to people. People have joined our business not on the basis of what we pay them, but what we give them in enabling them to do something that they feel is worthwhile and to work in an environment in which they feel valued. We're very lucky to have attracted some very talented young people and other people to do that. And I think of myself very much of the current custodian of this business. It is theirs in the future. I'm not 21. You may have spotted. So, I think in that sense, yes. But I do believe that good leadership is good leadership. I hear a lot spoken about, oh, this is being done badly, it should be moved into the private sector, or this is being done badly, it should be moved into the public sector. And sometimes that's dogma, and it isn't really borne out either by logic or data or facts. I find really excellent leadership in all sectors, and I see some really diabolical leadership in all sectors, and that I think is the main thing that makes the difference.
Okay, thank you, Mike. So, Alex, from your experience from the organisations you work with, do you find those organisations tend to be less hierarchical? What is the quality of the interaction between employees and the organisation itself?
Okay, so the majority of the people that I work with are quite early stage. So they may only be working with small numbers of people, perhaps not even as employees. So quite a few of my award winners work with volunteers, and that might be volunteer board members. And I think on the whole, they do really well at attracting people who share the same values as the business. So if they can't yet afford to employ somebody, getting a really great board on board is just as important to fill in some of those skills gaps that they might have. A lot of the people that we work with are leaders with lived experience, so people who've been motivated to set up businesses because of something that's happened to them personally or something that's really affected them. So there might be somebody with a really great idea, but without those kind of leadership skills. So I think part of the experience, particularly in North Staffordshire, where we're working with a cohort of people, is around developing those skills around leadership, collaboration. So yeah, I think it's difficult to say because of the lack of employees, really, but there's a lot of issues, a lot of barriers, and by working together with other organisations at a similar stage, I think that's a really beneficial route to go down.
That's great. Thank you for that. So, if we can just move back to thinking about our customers again, because I've got a question here from Beverly from Synergy Synthetic Surfaces, and I'll just read out her question. She says, I have designed a safer sports surface with the potential of multi-sports application. We've exceeded specifications and advanced scientific testing techniques, so quite way down the road there. But it is B2B, and there has been some resistance to discussing reducing the risk of injury in sport. How can we help our clients to be more comfortable discussing these issues? Let's go to Mike first.
That sounds like a tough question.
It is a tough question, isn't it? I guess we can only answer it from the perspective as how can we use the structure to have conversations with customers that might be difficult to have.
I think almost irrespective of the sector and whether or not you have something that you believe is great for the people you think can benefit from it, this in the end comes down to good selling and good human connections. We've been giving some things away. We've had to try just as hard to give them away as ever we have had to try to sell things that people are paying for. It seems to us there's next to no difference. And having a brilliant product that can really help in a social context does not mean that anybody is going to take it from you. and all those things which are true for any kind of business in understanding customer and being very targeted and focused and seeing things from their perspective and understanding the reason that would make them want your fabulous thing, they apply here as well. And so forgive me if that's too generic an answer, but I think it's, that's what I believe. It's good human connections with people that are the start of good selling.
Yeah, absolutely. What about your experience, Alex?
I'd say if I was advising my social entrepreneur, I'd ask them to look at like what else is out there as an alternative to this, and what is the unique selling point of what it is that you're offering. But look at those organisations that you're looking to sell into, and kind of pick up on the what's in it for them. Because like Mike says, you might have this brilliant product, but unless you can match your product and what it has to offer with the perceived needs of that organisation that you're trying to sell to, then I think it's really difficult to get in to have that human conversation. I think once that rapport has been developed, then you could then talk more in the specifics of what you have in mind. But I think you have to play the game, I guess, a little bit in terms of finding out what they want to get out of your product potentially, and then use that as a hook for further conversations.
So I guess that's not a structure thing, that's actually a good business thing, isn't it? Yeah, the material. So I've got a couple of questions here that are coming through on email. I've got a question here from Jeremy Cliff from Human Nature Escapes, and he's a kick. And he's saying fundamentally he's really struggled to engage with different organisations, including universities, over the last few years. What's your experience in terms of collaboration? Because I know, Mike, you talk a lot about collaboration and the success you've had. Have you got any advice there?
Well, each of us is different, I'm sure, and so what's true for our kicks may not be true for others. So, and I know next to nothing about Jeremy's organisation, but I think making the first move is what seems to be successful for us. Often people think if you're in any position, if you're in two different positions, sometimes people will say, no, this is my position, I'm going to stay here. Or they'll even say, I'd quite like to move, I'm prepared to move to the middle ground. But even the middle ground leaves a gap. And so if you want to really reach out and collaborate with somebody, I think you have to go and stand where they're standing and go and go and work out what it is that they're worried about and why they're worried about it, and see actually if something that you have is going to be useful. It's a bit like the answer I gave to the last question, really, but I think it's right.
Yep. Okay. All right. Alex, what about you?
Okay, I think there's some huge challenges here, and this is something that our collective of social entrepreneurs are looking at in North Staffordshire, because there's lots of barriers in terms of traditional structures of power, limited budgets, conservatism with a small c of doing things the way they've always been done, even if they're not working right. And I think it's really difficult to navigate those. And I think social enterprise, one of Unlimited's organisational objectives is to mainstream social enterprise, because it's seen as something that's over there, and there's something over here that is corporate business or traditional institutions. And I'm really interested about how we can connect those so that they can learn from each other, because I think it's a two-way learning street. And I think in the future, this is all kind of big, long-term pieces of work that the way that the world's going at the moment, we can't continue in the way that we are. So why can't we share good practice and look at alternatives and alternative ways of doing business?
Yes, absolutely. Will, do you have a question here?
I do. I have a comment on that first before we move on, if I may. I think the points that both of the other panelists have made are very valid. I think with a specifically kind of Keele hat on, if you like. The university is obviously very interested in supporting charities and social enterprises and the community. It does a lot of work on that. So we've had charities and social enterprises through our innovation programs. We've had research projects that have been funded with them. Most recently, I think, as part of COVID response, we've funded over 50 interns to go into charities and not-for-profits to work with them on kind of reactive projects that are really important. And we also have fairly recently landed a joint bid with the University of Birmingham from the Office for Students and Research England, a large part of which, it's a knowledge exchange bid. A large part of that will be around civic engagement with the community, engaging with social enterprises, and supporting them to further their own projects as well. So that's just, I suppose, something to take a look at in a specific response to that question that came in. But I'm interested to pick up a couple of things. You mentioned two fairly big sounding things there, Alex. And I think one was something around systems mapping and challenges, and one was around your place-based work in North Staffs. And I know you have an interest in kind of resilient communities. Could you give us a quick bit of insight into those and maybe some of the stories that are emerging around that?
Yeah, of course. So we undertook a formal course on systems mapping with a company called Acumen. And that's free for groups to use. We collaborated, so it was a small group of local social entrepreneurs and myself, and we mapped what we thought was the current system in North Staffordshire, and we identified that there's quite a lot of vicious circles. So there's let me explain what that is. It's kind of as you would imagine, a circle that's really hard to break the cycle, because there's factors that are always going to affect the outcome, and it's really difficult to have influence. So we were looking at the points where we might influence. So not only are there kind of institutional barriers that we found, in terms of, I'll give an example through commissioning. With local authorities is a real challenge, just the way that process is structured for smaller organisations to be able to tender for work. But not only that, the fact that North Staffordshire, if it's selling goods and services as a social enterprise, North Staffordshire hasn't got a lot of surplus cash, and I guess even now. So businesses might be struggling, they might not have additional money to invest in supporting social enterprises as part of their corporate social responsibility commitments. So there was a lot of things really that we had limited control on changing that could open up some of those doorways to enable social entrepreneurs to strive. Because I think we've got people with great ideas who are starting things up. They've got great experience and they've got solid propositions. But actually, in terms of generating income, it has been a struggle, particularly those working in sectors where they might be trying to commission services with local authorities or the NHS, for example, particularly around things like wellbeing. And I don't know, Mike, you work in that sector, so I don't know if you've got any comments about whether that rings true.
I think, yeah, that I said before that sometimes even giving things away is hard work. I'm not saying that the people we're working with have given us hard work, but it's a process that you still need to go through. I wonder, it's part of that understanding, I wonder whether some of the larger public sector organisations have a good balance of understanding of risks. A lot of those procurement arrangements are very focused on a risk around giving good value for money and not exposing organisations to financial risk. And sometimes those are the risks that are concentrated on. What they may also do is introduce invisible risks about getting access to very high value suppliers who also are delivering consequential, connected social benefit that fits some other objectives that organisations like public sector organisations, local authorities have. And so a bit of flexibility in doing those things. In COVID and in lockdown, we've encountered quite a number of public sector organisations who have been very slow to respond. Even some about whom we're the NHS we're celebrating at the moment, but there are bits of the NHS that cannot still communicate effectively with their customers and their patients and their suppliers, because the security around their video conferencing facilities like this is so tightly locked down, focusing on one risk, that they introduce not a risk but a current issue of being unable to deliver some of the services they need to do. So there is a debate there, but I think in terms of our influence, what we really try and do is come at things from the point of view of saying, what can we do for you? And start that first and ask ourselves some difficult questions. It may not be possible for others, but we have, for example, asked ourselves the question, how could our customers get the benefit of our services without their having to pay for them? So looking other places to find the money, or finding things that we can give without it costing money to build trust and relationships that start to break down some of those procurement and other things. Trust is the thing. If they can see some of those other benefits, then there might be some willingness to look at flexibility that get over some of those problems that you've been talking about.
I think that's a really good point, Mike. And I think commissioning is something we've certainly had that experience with in the past. We did some work with Bath and North East Somerset Council around their kind of think local, think social policy. And what we found there was, yes, there was the kind of risk element and the way that was being managed and assessed. But also there was just a whole lot to be said for better communication and also better understanding, not necessarily thinking of the two sides, if you like, as opposing, but to say, actually, we've got small organisations that may not be familiar with complex procurement processes. We have large organisations that may not initially have set up those processes to be accessible to the types of organisations that might be able to deliver that kind of impact. And I think some of the most impactful work we did there actually was just to get both groups into a room. You tell them what you do, you tell them what you do, have a discussion about it. And actually that just starting to get a bit more of a shared understanding, so that it's perhaps less of a computer says no moment at the point when you want to try and submit something, but rather a much earlier conversation, so that you can have a look at whether that's a possible, and whether that's something you can imagine together. I think can be really powerful, but it's a big challenge, and I think we're a long way off, a fully functioning system in that regard, if you like.
So moving the conversation on a little bit, how do you feel, we talked about how this might feel for customers and how customers might interact with our organisations in a different structure. How do you feel that this might feel for employees? And do organisations like yours, Mike, feel differently about working for you as an organisation? Does that help you to use your model to attract talent?
Yes.
Good.
So in case you're frightened, I'm not going to say more than just yes. That might be a good idea, I don't know. The answer is yes, yes, yes. If people can feel engaged with the idea of doing something good in a good way, it's a fabulous way to attract people. It's almost the case if you the way you're attracting people is by the highest salary in this sector, and for some of the things that we do, you're just going to be attracting the wrong people. We've found some very talented people who want to come to us because they want to come to us, so it's a good thing before you get here. So they have said to us, and it's a good thing when they arrive, because it's just a soul thing. It nurtures your soul to be doing something good with your life most of the time. And so, yeah, I'm going to say yes. It's every bit of experience we've had is yes.
Alex, what the organisations that you work with, have they found the same or similar?
Absolutely. The people that we work with are wonderful, and not the usual suspects as well, and a combination of all of the above. So I know Mike said about, you know, people's pay and salaries and that, and the people that are generally motivated to work in this sector are doing it because they're motivated by the values that underpin whatever they're doing. And it makes for a really exciting time when you get those people together in a room. We work with a lot of leaders with lived experience, as I mentioned, and they've got so many skills that they bring to the table. It might not necessarily be business skills at the early stage, but you know, that's a work in progress. We can work with people to upskill them, and they can upskill each other, and they can upskill me. I'm on a learning curve as well, working with the wonderful people that I do. So yeah, the answer is a definite yes. It's just a wonderful sector to surround myself in, people doing great things.
Yeah, absolutely. So can you give us a couple of examples where in the organisations you work with, what's been the benefit of that?
The benefit to
the organisation, yeah.
I think it helps drive things forward. So when individuals have been struggling to get traction with their business and there's been no income coming in or very limited, a lot of people might have given up, but actually it kind of gives people some motivation because they know what they're doing is needed, it's valuable. It's just because it might be slightly different. So it's about being resourceful, doing something with nothing. So working with each other, swapping skills rather than paying somebody to come in, paying each other to do pieces of work within the local sector in particular. You know, bringing those skills together so that even if they're doing different things, they might be able to work collaboratively with others. And I think those kind of softer skills really do help keep things going when times are tough, which is now, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess that brings in the question of resilience. Are these structures, do they enable us to be more resilient? I think that's a really interesting point, because when I look at work that I do outside of Keele, you know, if you look at the FTSE All-Share Index, which includes organisations along the lines that we're talking about, they tend to be 15% above traditional structures of the people in their own sector. So they're doing better than those organisations in their own sector. Generally, there are exceptions, but generally that's the case. And one of the reasons that's quoted for that, by particularly other universities doing research on this, is that they are more resilient. They're resilient to change. They're much more fleet of foot. They have different conversations that are going on in their organisation. Is this your experience?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So particularly with COVID, we've been doing some research about what our award winners are doing. So that's people with early stage social enterprises or other similar structures. And we've found that although some people have paused for now, many of them have been able to pivot really quickly. And because they haven't got commitments in terms of large number of employees, they're able to just really understand very quickly the kind of local need at a really micro level. For example, we've got people doing meal deliveries that they've never done before. They might have done cookery classes on quite a small scale, but they've really quickly turned the business around, got some support in. There's loads of volunteers and within a couple of days they're out delivering meals, and they've been doing that now for 10 weeks. So I think because they've got that flexibility, and there's something in the mindset of people who work in this sector that they're very can-do and also very hands-on. So they might not have the most resources, but they know how to get things done with very little input in terms of money or investment or anything else, really. Meg Steele.
Can you just pick up on a point there? You said in the sector, because what my experience is, this isn't a sector, this is a business structure. So some of the organisations that I've worked with have been, they are in the NHS, who have been one of the mutuals that has spun out of the public sector, particularly the old PTC organisations in mental health and all this, and they've become a kick, because it fits their model very nicely, and it fits the social purpose of being ex-NHS, if you like. So it's not, I would say it's not so much a sector as a structure that enables you to do what you want to do and how you want to run your business. Would you agree with that, or do you think it's something different?
Yeah, and I think it's a little bit intangible in many ways, because I guess I describe it as a sector, meaning several things, really. People who might have a slightly different legal structure, they might be a kick or somebody with social values within the structure of their organisation somehow, but also people of the same mindset. So I agree. Some people I've worked with people from the NHS who've then gone to set up their own social enterprises because they can see that their job in the NHS was being done in a way that was not as efficient as it could be, or it was not person-centred. So it's a bad word to use, really, a sector, but it's more about that kind of mindset, that can-do attitude, and having that purpose running at the forefront of everything that they do.
Yeah. Do you have a question? I think you do, don't you?
I do. I'll combine two questions in the interest of time, if that's okay. So we've seen massive action from social purpose organisations in the form of COVID response. We've also, I think, a listener commented that we've seen local communities and community organisations responding much faster and arguably more effectively than central government initiatives. Alex, can we hear some more about COVID response locally and what that looks like? And also, if you've got any suggestions in a post-COVID world for how we turn that kind of people-powered willingness to help into delivering true social value that's also long-lasting for the benefit of our local community.
I think locally, the social entrepreneurs that I work with have been almost business as usual in terms of planning for their future post-COVID. In other areas, there's been a real shift. So I work across the West Midlands and the Northwest, and much of that work's been immediate response, but in ways in which perhaps local government can't. I think that particularly like in Manchester, for example, where the local authority and other organisations, umbrella organisations supporting social ventures have thrown some money out, and people have just snapped it up. And, you know, we've got people working with those who might have been newly arrived into the country and not been entitled to any benefits. So they're, you know, like, how do you access those people because they're not engaging with public services? So the response has been based on that real local knowledge that perhaps the government doesn't know about, social services doesn't know about, the NHS might not know about. In North Staffordshire, it's been more about future planning, I think. I think a lot of the voluntary organisations have been picking up some of that kind of volunteer care work and that sort of thing. Our social entrepreneurs have been thinking about the future and what that future looks like. And to answer the second part of your question, it's interesting because I think now is a really pivotal moment where we can try and get organisations from different sectors around the table. So how can we do things differently. We're almost forced in a position to do this, like with the environmental emergency, climate change. Local authorities are going to be struggling even more so now to provide services, and this is about genuine grassroots involvement in shaping services that are needed by local people, and it's not being prescribed by anybody. It's our local social entrepreneurs want to work with people on the ground to find out what they want, and not have services done to. And for them to be appreciated for the work that they're putting in. So they might be volunteers, they're being undervalued currently. So how can we really reach those people at this important time? Because they've been keeping the country going at a really local level.
So just to finish off, because we're getting close to time right now. So I've got a question from Nick from SIH. It's asked if collaboration is a way of handling risk-averse large groups. And I wonder, Mike, if you can come here and just talk a little bit about what are the opportunities for collaboration, and how does your structure allow itself to do that in a different way, perhaps?
I think that there's something about the dealing with the difference between the great things that have happened in a difficult circumstance because we've been compelled to do them, as Alex was saying. There's been some really good examples of communities and organizations of all kinds doing things which people inside them or as whole organizations said could not be done before. And because of this hardship, we've overcome that. We're a great believer in this notion that don't let what you can't do get in the way of what you can do. And so I think we need to remember that a number of people have, done things they've never done before, used technology in ways they didn't do before, cut their own hair even. And we've got to remember that they haven't been sold that they were forced to do it. And if these things were possible always before, because we're just showing that all those things which were apparently impossible are actually possible, then we need to challenge ourselves back about the quality of our advocacy. How good were we at selling these benefits? Did we have to wait for hardship to be the catalyst for what we're doing? So to answer Nick's question about collaboration, we need to have a style of leadership together that is both supportive and challenging, that does not accept the no answer. We wrote to a client recently and we actually said, we are going to bang on your door one last time to give you this. And it was challenging and it was a bit irritating to them, but they did continue with us because we were prepared to say there's something better beyond this difficulty that we're overcoming, and we're prepared to reach out and bend and change ourselves to enable you to do that. So I think there's a little bit of that in it, just really reaching out and challenging ourselves to say, we've got to, if it's that good, we should be better at selling it and persuading.
And being in the SIH, which you are, I think that's also lent itself to you to be, because that's the spaces there about, its purpose is to enable organisations to collaborate. Have you found that as well, Mike?
Absolutely. Fantastic, transformative thing for our business being part of Keele's SIH. Fabulous support in terms of from the university and from Santander in providing talented people who want to come and do a great thing in our business. An amazing idea. I can't speak highly enough of it, and I'm sorry it's been the last minute of this webinar before I've said that, but it's heartfelt, and I'd encourage anybody to reach out to organisations like Keele and Keele specifically, because they have so much to offer. For me personally and for our business, it's just opened doors that would never, I didn't even know were there, frankly.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's on that note we might need to close up the webinar. I think we'll just to thank you so much both to Alex. Fantastic. Thank you so much for giving your time today, and same to you, Mike. It's always a pleasure to talk to people who are actually trying to do this in a different way, but actually we appreciate that we have such a lot of commonality around what all we're trying to do is to have a sustainable business model that aligns the interest of everyone within that organisation for the success of the organisation. And whatever your structure might be as businesses, that's what we're trying to do. So thank you so much, Dave, to sharing what might be an alternative model that is actually viable, and there's so many of us that are doing that. Within on the FTSE index, there are 10% of organisations using alternative models. It's not something that's a new thing. It's something that's been going on for centuries, actually, in reality, and very successfully. So thank you very much to you two for sharing that. Is there any last things you want to say there, Will?
No, there's not. Just to say thank you to the panelists. There's been a couple of questions we didn't get a chance to get to, so I've just been furiously and quietly typing responses in the chat. So apologies, but yeah, just a thank you all around, and a thank you to everyone for coming along today.
Okay. And just finally, thank you to the Hixon Group for hosting the platform, and thank you for everyone who's given their questions and comments today. Reminder to keep that conversation going on Twitter and LinkedIn using the hashtag Keele Talks Business. We'd be really appreciative if you do that. If you check on the website, the Keele Business website, you'll find the future webinars. There's several that are coming up over the next few months. Some really interesting topics, some fantastic speakers that we've got lined up there. And just a call to arms, really. It's like Mike has said, if you've got businesses there, they've got issues they want resolving, or you just want to get involved, do that through Keele's Business Gateway. They've got a series of programs which will link you to a level of expertise and talents from the local area, and just contact the Business Gateway to do that. Just now to say thanks very much, everyone. Thank you for joining us, and see you next time. Thanks, folks.